Let me share my screen. Nice. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So we're going to do Atmabodha, knowledge of the self. So we're going to do the first verse, and we're going to read both the Sanskrit and the English because that's the tradition, and the Sanskrit kind of gives you certain, like, I'm going to be talking about certain words which are very important, and I will also talk about the Sanskrit as well. And those words are very important because as I said, like, one word can sort of take you to an experience and give you an experience, and that's kind of uh, the way this work is taught. So maybe before we begin, one more thing I want to say is, this is not a philosophy class. It's not like you're getting a bunch of ideas and that's going to now somehow, you can sort of discuss it and talk about it at dinner. That's not the intention of this. This is a process. So, you're given certain ideas and certain tools, and you have to use those tools in your day-to-day life and see if those tools actually transform your life. So this work is about transformation. It's not about understanding so much. So maybe it's also worth talking about yoga. So the word yoga essentially means union, right? So it comes from the root yuj, which means to join, and yoga means you're joining two things. So you're joining two things, right? So that means that there's something which is not united, and I'm trying to unite it. And the way we explain it in this work is that we have a mind and we have the infinite, and the mind is the one that is confused and has a problem, and we are going to use a certain tool and a process to sort of give the mind an experience where it will be fundamentally transformed. And because of this transformation, it will lose its sort of grip and concreteness about this world. And that kind of dissolves. And because it dissolves, what is left is just the infinite. So it's not so much of a process of actually joining, but it's more of a process of dissolution. But because of the fact that the mind kind of dissolves, there is this experience of union that happens, which is why the word yoga is used. And specifically, we are going to be studying Jnana Yoga, sorry, which is one of the four major yogas that exist. And Jnana Yoga is yoga of knowledge, which means that we're going to use the mind as a doorway to the infinite, which is that's why we're studying these ideas, and we're given these ideas because the ideas sort of work with our mind. So we let's say an idea is presented to us, we use this idea, we get this understanding of it, and then there may be a practice associated to it, and with this practice, there's subtle transformation happens within our mind if we keep practicing it, and at some point this idea gets completely assimilated, and so we don't need to hold on to this idea anymore, and then we're given a new idea because now we are sort of like ready for the second idea, and that's kind of the process. So every sort of stage we're given a slightly more subtle idea and a process and a tool which we use, and once we internalize the tool and once we become the tool, then we move on to the next tool. So it's kind of a process that we're going through. It's not just about like reading something and and that's the end. Like, reading is not the end. Of course intellectual understanding is important, but what we want is a direct experience. And usually when we do this class, we do this in the presence of a teacher, because the teacher has this ability to give you an experience while you're listening to an idea. So while you're listening to some idea, that idea has sort of experience associated to it, in the form of words, but then also while you're listening to it, the teacher can put you in an experience where the idea and your experience meet at the same time. And so we go from an intellectual knowledge to a direct experience. And that's what we want. We want to have a direct experience where, we have no doubt about what we are talking about or what this work is talking about. It's kind of like, an analogy is like, I'm trying to understand what a mango tastes like. And, I can read all about, what a mango tastes like, what's the shape, what's the color, what's the smell. I can read all about it. But unless I actually taste it, it's all theoretical knowledge, right? So what we want is like always wanting to eat the mango, not about looking at the mango or smelling the mango. And once you eat the mango, you know what the mango is like. So, and then you don't need to like imagine or think about or, contemplate about what a mango is like, because you know. And this is what we're going to go through, which is we're going to try to get an experience and not just have an intellectual understanding. All right, so with that said, let us begin. So the first verse is a meditation verse, and let us read what this says. Om Pratasmarami Hridi Sanspuradaatmatattvam Satchitta Sukham Paramham Sagatin Turiyam Yatswapna Jaga Shuptam Evati Nityam Tadbrahma Nishkalam Maham Nachu Bhuta Sangadaha. So in the early hours of the day, I meditate upon the essential self, clearly experienceable in the heart cave, that which is existence, knowledge, bliss in nature, that which is the supreme goal, the Paramahamsa state, that which is the fourth plane of consciousness, which constantly illumines all experiences in the dream, waking, and deep sleep conditions. I am that partless Brahman, not this assemblage of matter envelopments. All right, so this is a lot, so we have to unpack it. And one thing to know about a meditation verse is that usually you read this before a meditation, which is why they're called meditation verses. And one thing to note is that a meditation verse, you read it before, because what it does is it's like it has certain ideas that you can that can take you to an experience. And if your mind is subtle enough, it can immediately take you there. And if it's not subtle enough, it wouldn't take you there. So, obviously we're doing this in the beginning of the course. So like, I don't expect any of this to make any sense, but we're going to unpack it. And then by the end of the course, when you read this, it should be very clear about like what each of these things mean. And, they're all pointing you in a particular direction, and it's all trying to take you somewhere. So you can read a certain part of this verse and you can go there, so that's kind of our goal, to kind of be in a place where I can read meditation verses and just, it can directly take me to the place that it's pointing to. So, all of this is kind of like poetry, right? So like when a poet is writing poetry, they have a certain experience in mind and a certain feeling that they're translating into language. And then if we can sort of sync with the poet's mind and poet's like experience, then when we read the poetry, we can kind of go there. So that's kind of the same idea, where we want to go where the words and the experience is taking us. So let's begin. So in the early hours of the day, I meditate upon the essential self. So we want to meditate in the morning and the early hours of the day, because in the early hours of the day, my mind is the most quiet. I just woke up. I may have woken up slightly early than I normally do, so that I have this 1 hour of time just dedicated to myself. I have no worries to say I need to get this done. Usually when I wake up right before a meeting, I'm like super like hurried and stressed and saying, oh my God, I need to make it to the meeting. But if I have enough time where I'm like, all right, I have 3 hours before I have to really do anything. So in those 3 hours, I have no, my mind is not engaged in something. I'm free, right? So in that sense. So in those moments when my mind is a little free from like the worldly responsibilities, that's the best time to meditate, because what we're trying to do in meditation is get a little bit of distance from my mind. And I want to experience the self. So which is why it says, I meditate upon the essential self, clearly experienceable in the heart cave. And the heart cave is essentially just a word we use to represent the self. Like, we don't have to get into too much of this because this is a whole thing. We will get into this a little later, but which is existence, knowledge, bliss, and nature. So this is a word that you will hear a lot in this work, which is Sat Chit Ananda is the Sanskrit translation. So existence is that, and notice that's in a capital, right? So it's existence with like the infinite existence, which is, if I ask you the question, are you alive? You'd say yes. Do you exist? I'd say yes. So there is this sense of I am, right? Like I am. Like I don't know what I am, but I definitely know that I am. And that's true all the time. There's no point in your experience where you feel that you are not. I am is the basis of every experience. So that's kind of what existence means, that it is existence itself. Because after the fact that you exist, then you can experience this world. But if you don't have existence, then you cannot experience this world. So existence is the fundamental basis of every experience. So I am is always true. Tell me a time when you're not. Can you find such a time? And even if you do, there has to be something that is there to know that you're not, right? So like there's a contradiction even when you say I am not, because to say I am not, you have to be. So there's existence is always there. So this self and who we really are has the nature of existence. And then the second word is chit, which is knowledge, which I guess, so knowledge, we are always trying to seek something, right? Like I want to know. I want to know something. So if I ask you the question, what is it that allows you to know things, right? So like you have to be aware to be able to look at something. You have to be aware to be able to hear something. And, using the five senses, we gather input, and then we sort of know that, yes, this is a tree in front of me, or this is a glass in front of me, or this is a chair, this is a table. And through this input, we're sort of like able to recognize and know things. But what is it that allows me to even be aware of stuff? And that is what the self is. Its nature is that it has this revealing property where I am able to know things. And if I know that which knows everything, I have known everything. So that's kind of why there is so much importance on knowing the self, because once I know the self, I know the fundamental material for everything, which is I know the entire universe in that way. So if this doesn't make self, put it on the shelf, and we'll come back to this idea over and over again. And then finally, bliss. And this is interesting because a lot of people, meditate and like get into this work, but they're like, I don't feel the bliss. We're always trying to seek the bliss. And the bliss here is that the source, the nature of the self is that it's blissful. And the mind is the one that's either happy or sad or like, anxious or worried or paranoid. All of that is the property of the mind. Whereas the self is kind of like blissful. And if our attention is on the mind, which is, if my mind is very active, I'm constantly thinking about a project that I have to finish, or I have to have this conversation with my boss, and I'm, so the mind is very active and my attention is on the mind. And so because of which I feel, worried, or I feel anxious. But if my attention can be sort of introverted and I can focus on the self, you will see that the self is always blissful. And right now, we don't have the capacity to be able to focus on the self. So what we're going to do is we're going to learn tools where we can learn to introvert our attention, where right now my entire attention is on the mind all the time. I'm always looking at what the mind is presenting. Instead, do I have the capacity to like put the stuff that the mind presents on the side and turn my attention to, where is it that my experience begins? And that's the process that we're going to go through. Like, how do we sort of put the mind on the side and try to turn our attention and see who am I? Who am I really? So that's, existence, consciousness, bliss, and, which is the supreme goal, because, we are all seeking something. From the moment we wake up in the morning to the time we fall asleep, there is some activity happening. And our activities are based on the desires that we have. So if you look at your life, the things that you're doing, things that you've done, they've all been done because of a desire, that I wanted something. And mostly this I want something has this root of like, I want happiness in the end. Because you wouldn't be doing the things that you're doing unless there was this root desire of like, if I do this, then I will be happy. Because our entire choices that we make is based on this fundamental desire that I am seeking happiness. But unfortunately, what happens is that when we make certain choices, and when we get certain things, we realize that, wow, I wanted, that crazy promotion, but it didn't really make me that happy. I thought it would have, but it didn't. Now I have changed, now I want something else. So now we put all of our energy into, maybe acquiring this big house because that's what we want, or finding this perfect partner, or like, wanting to make a shit ton of money, or like wanting to be famous, or wanting to be like successful. All these different ideas that we have, they all have the root, which is, I want happiness. The problem is that they don't deliver. So is there something that delivers? And people in history have said that this delivers, and there are people right now in this world who say this delivers. So this is the supreme goal of human life, because once we get a taste of this, our sense of seeking, because I think this is going to give me happiness, is going to fall away, because we realize that there's nothing out there that really can satisfy me, because this world is void, or as the Buddhists say, it's like shunya, like it's empty in that sense. It really doesn't have the ability to really satisfy or permanently satisfy me. It can give me a certain amount of pleasure for sure, but it doesn't last forever. And what makes me happy is very different from what makes you happy. So clearly, it's not the thing that gives happiness, right? It's how I look at it and how I have formed my opinion about something. So if we understand that, we know that the world really cannot deliver. And then the question arises, what is it that can deliver? And then this work begins. And this is all, you take this all as a hypothesis, because, these are experiments you can try. And make your own conclusions. Because in the end, we want our own sort of direct experience and our own direct understanding of all of this. So that is a supreme goal. And Paramahamsa state. So this is a word that you will see in the Indian traditions of realized people. Like they would be called Paramahamsa. That's kind of the title of somebody. And I guess this means, so Hamsa is a bird, which usually is a kind of like a swan. And according to mythology, a swan has an ability to take all the good stuff and discard the bad stuff, and specifically in the context of milk. So if you mix milk and water together, the swan can essentially drink all of the milk and not touch the water. So it has this uncanny ability to just like reject the useless things in the context of the milk and water. So Paramahamsa is like a supreme swan. So Param means supreme. So a supreme swan is somebody who can take all the good things in life and reject all the useless things. And he's done this on an sort of infinite level, right? So he has realized the self. So he has taken the best part of life and he has rejected the useless parts of life. So, if all of our energies is spent on just the material world, they are missing out on life, is what the implications of this is. That, you rather, suck out the life aspect of this experience and reject just the material aspects of this. And when we do that, we get to the fourth plane of consciousness. And why fourth? Because there's essentially, in this work, we say there's three planes of our experience, which is, there's the deep sleep state, the dream state, and the waking state. Those are the three levels of experience that we have. And we go to deep sleep, we experience it, and then we wake up, we experience like the waking state, and then somewhere in the middle of deep sleep and waking state, we have a dream state, right? So these are the three planes of consciousness that we have. But there is a fourth plane. It's not like the fourth plane is separate from these three states. It's kind of the context in which these three states happen, because I am experiencing all these states. So like I said, when we say the self is existence itself, I am is the fundamental basis of all my experiences. So I am is true even in deep sleep. It's true even in waking. It's true even in dream. So I am is the basis. So once we recognize that I there, that's the fourth plane of consciousness, because it transcends all the three. And it's not like it's a separate state. It's just called fourth for, just to distinguish the three states that exist. So we'll get into all of this much more deeply in the course of the book, but this is like a kind of an overview. So there's this three states, it illumines all of these three states, and he then says that I am the partless Brahman. And Brahman here again is a new word that we're going to be introduced to. It's the word we use to describe the infinite. It's the material cause of this world. It is the world. It is everything. So that's kind of like hard to imagine, because it's such a magnanimous thing that is trying to describe. But but you'll hear this word a lot, and we'll get into this a little later as well. And he says, not this assemblage of matter envelopments. And he says this. So in this work, there's always this use of these pronouns, which is this and that, you and I. And the reason why they use pronouns and not words like God and stuff, because the moment you say a word which can give you an idea, then your mind is going to be very focused on it. So if I say something like Shiva, right? To a Hindu, Shiva means something very different to somebody who is from the West, or somebody who's never heard of it. So instead, we want to use words which are neutral. So like this is very neutral, or that is very neutral. So this is something which is closer, and that is something which is further. That is the only thing that this and that can indicate, other than it being just like neutral pronouns, right? Like it doesn't really give you an image about any specific thing. So this here, he's referring to the body. So no, because he's saying matter envelopment. So I'm not this body. I am something beyond. I'm the partless Brahman. What he's referring to, we don't know yet, but that's exciting, right? Like, so he's trying to pull us in to say, yes, I am that partless Brahman, and I'm not this body. So now the question is there something beyond the mind and the body? And is there a way to experience that, not from a philosophical standpoint, but from a direct standpoint? And the answer is yes. And then he's written this book about it, which will take us through the process. Cool. So any questions about this?
I was just wondering if you could, in terms of meditation, what exactly does that mean in this context? Because does it mean trying to think of nothing, or does it mean focusing on the particular passage at hand, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we haven't come across a meditation yet, but through the book we will learn a few meditation tools, and there's specific tools that we will learn, and we will get into that. And I guess I didn't speak about this. So this class is 90 minutes. So the first 70 minutes we will spend on the text, and 20 minutes we will meditate. And in this 20 minutes, I will give you all a meditation. So
okay, thank you.
You will learn how to meditate there. Cool. Any other thoughts? All right, let us get into the first verse. Verse 1. Tapo bihi shina papanam shantanam vitaraginam mumukshunam apekshyoyam Atmabodho vidhiyate. So I am composing this Atmabodha, the treatise on the self-knowledge, for those who have purified themselves by austerities, who are peaceful in heart, who are free from cravings and are desirous of liberation. All right, so this person, Shankara, is composing Atmabodha, which is a treatise on self-knowledge. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to get a taste of who I am. That's the first question we answer in this work. Who am I? And then we answer a couple of other questions, but for the majority of this book, we are going to focus on the first question, which is who am I? And it's not something that, this book will answer. It'll give you tools to question your experience and get to a place where you will have a direct taste of that experience. So, I cannot tell you who you are because, you will have to find out for yourself. So it's a process that we go through, and every individual goes through their own process. And these are just tools that you can use to get to that final place. And there are some prerequisites to this, which is, those who have purified themselves by austerities. And this essentially means that, you have a sense that, the world and the material world cannot really give you what you're looking for. You've had some exposure to life, you've experienced the world a little bit. If you're like a 10-year-old person who has a heart full of desires and wants to enjoy this world, this work is probably not going to be very effective for you, because what's going to happen is the world is going to keep grabbing your attention, and you're going to keep getting pulled into the world and sucked into the world, wanting to like do stuff. And if you want to do stuff, that's totally fine. Go and do the stuff. And once you're satisfied, then come to this work, because it's very difficult to have a lot of desires in the heart where I want to keep expressing myself in this world and do this work. But once you finish this work, then you can do whatever you want. So that's kind of a contradiction there. But, there has to be some sort of like enough experience to say that I am looking for something beyond this world. Like that desire needs to be there. So that's kind of like, the sense of purity. So purity doesn't here mean like a moral purity. So in this work, the word for pure is punya, and in Sanskrit. So, and this literally means that the volume level of thoughts in my mind is not very loud. It's much more, it's slightly quiet compared to like, and by volume, I mean the number of like desires that I have. I want, a big house. I want like a fancy car. I want like a perfect partner. I want to be liked by everybody. All these voices that exist and that impel us into action, those are slightly fewer. And that's what it means to be pure, because if the volume of those thoughts are very loud, I'm going to keep getting pulled into doing those things. And then you can reduce those volumes. I mean, if you do have it, that's fine. And there's a process that you can go through to reduce the volume as well. And this work will also help you reduce the volume as well. But, karma yoga, which is like another kind of yoga where you're doing and engaging yourself in works, but you're doing it to fulfill my desire, so that I'm, I am done with certain desires, where I don't keep repeating those desires. And if we can talk about that, in a later class, but essentially this is saying that, the volume level of your mind is a little low. And then the second one is, who are peaceful in heart. And this essentially means that, who, your heart is, you have gotten a certain, you've been successful in life. Maybe you've like kind of like experienced the world. You are satisfied by certain things. You've, faced the joys and you've faced the pleasures, and you're kind of, you're kind of a rounded person in that sense. And you're not kind of like racing all the time. So that's kind of what it means to be peaceful. And then who are free from cravings is that, like what I was saying in the earlier thing, where like you're not like striving to get like material things. Because if your energy is fully there, you should probably spend your time in that work first. Get what you really, really want in the material world. And once you're done, then come to this work. Because it's very hard to do both things, because this work is basically going to tell you to not focus on your material things that much, because it requires a lot of patience and attention to do this work. And if let's say you're trying to build a company, and that requires like pretty much a lot of attention. So you rather do that and then come to this. And then finally, desirous of liberation, you're here on a Saturday morning and, so at some level you do have a desire for liberation. This may sound like, a very difficult expectation to do this work. But this is like, this is for the top student, right? Like, so this is like, if you have all of these things in your heart, then liberation will occur to you very quickly in like, like it can happen instantaneously. If you're not here, that's totally fine too. I'm not saying that, if you're not fully purified and if you're not peaceful and if you have a lot of cravings, that this work is not going to be useful. It is. It's just that it's going to take slightly longer for you to get there, because your mind is going to keep coming in and out from this world. You're going to keep focusing on some desires that you have. You may, put a lot of energy there, and then you may put a little bit of energy here. And in the end, things happen because of our attention and our desires and our striving. So the more we strive for this work, the faster it will happen. If you put in 10% of energy, it'll happen, and it'll just take a lot longer. I see Arumal, your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
No worries, Puneet. I'm all good.
Okay. Cool. So that's kind of what this means. So don't be disappointed and like sad that you're not where Shankara wants you to be. This work is going to make you make your mind pure or like quiet. It's going to make your heart peaceful. So all of this is going to happen as part of this work. But if you're here, then in an instant you can get liberated. Any thoughts about this?
Actually, I have one quick question. Purified themselves by austerities. Could you touch upon that a little bit more in terms of like what austerities mean?
Right. So we have 4 kinds of yoga. So the work that we are doing is Jnana Yoga, which is specifically like the yoga of knowledge. But there's also Karma Yoga, there's Raja Yoga, and then there's Bhakti Yoga. So Karma Yoga is essentially yoga that's prescribed to people who love engaging in this world. I love to act, I love to like do a bunch of projects. But how do I do those kinds of projects where I'm not accumulating more and more bondage, but instead I'm letting go of like my karma, which essentially means, action. So I have a bundle of like desires that I have in me, and everyone has, and everyone has their own set of desires, and everyone is trying to fulfill those desires. But what usually ends up happening is that the moment I fulfill a desire, I have 10 other desires that happen because this one got fulfilled, right? Like, so if I got that one awesome promotion, now I want like 5 other promotions. So like, but how do I fulfill desires in a way that when I fulfill them, it ends? Like, this desire is done. I don't have the same desire again. So the way to do that is like another sort of process called Karma Yoga. We will potentially touch over that briefly in like a future class. But that's one way to, that's one sort of set of austerities that you can do. The other sort of austerities you can do is through like devotion. So Bhakti Yoga, where you can sort of engage yourself in singing the prayers and praying and sort of like not thinking about your ego so much, and you're sort of thinking about the Lord, right? Something higher than you. There is still this sense of duality here where like, I think I'm a small person, and like, whereas this God is this person who's greater than me. And what that does is it kind of humbles us a little bit, where, our sense of like awe and reverence increases, and that opens our heart. Because once we don't think ourselves to be like this big and mighty person, this work can help, can sort of happen a little bit more quickly, because our sense of ego has reduced. So that's like another set of austerities that you can do. And then, of course, you can do like the physical asanas and like, the hatha yoga and like the breathing exercises. All of those things are also austerities that you're doing. And what they're doing is they are purifying the mind, which is it's reducing the amount of attention I'm giving to thoughts that I'm having moment to moment. So all of those things can be austerities, and people do them. So we're kind of doing integral sort of yoga, right? Like, so you may have your own practice that you're doing on the side. You may be doing pranayama, you may be doing asanas, you may be doing some chanting, all kinds of things. You may be doing like, you may even go on like runs on the road, where you're just like running a lot, lots of physical activity. All of those things are like focusing your mind and making it more concentrated. You may be doing like hiking or climbing. All these things are like tools and devices that you can use to focus your mind so that it becomes one-pointed. One-pointed mind is a very good mind to be able to do this work.
So just so it sounds like purifying yourself through austerities is a chosen method of going through the process of relinquishing your bondage or your karma or your attachments, and going through perhaps a process of physical cleansing.
Yeah, it is a prerequisite, because in the end, so we will do the next verse, which is like, in the end, the answer to our question is knowledge, because action is not in opposition to what our problem is. Like, our problem is that we are ignorant about something, right? So if I ask you, oh, what does a mango taste like? How many, pilgrimages do you have to go on to answer that question? How many, push-ups do you have to do? Like, the only answer to that question is like, you have to eat the mango, really eat the mango, pay attention to the mango while you're eating it, and then you have a direct experience of it, right? If you eat the mango while you're not paying attention to it, then you may not even know what a mango tastes like, right? Like, that can happen when you're like super busy with something and you're working. Let's say you're working and you're eating some food, you forget what the food even tastes like, because my attention was not on the food, right? So our attention has to be fully on the experience. And when my attention is fully on the experience, that's when I really know what it is. So, this work is saying we're going to like point you to pay attention to something, and our mind needs to be fully there. Because if our mind is somewhere else, we will not really know what it is. And our mind can only be fully there when it is single pointed. And all of these things, these austerities will help us with our mind becoming single pointed, so it can then point to one thing that this work is going to lead to. And when it points to the one thing, you will have a direct experience of the self. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
Shreyas, do you have a question?
Hi, Puneet. Yes. So basically, like listening to the explanation of the first verse, there are a couple of things that, I wanted more clarity on. Like, firstly, I'm in between jobs right now. So I had a full-time job. I've quit that basically because I figured out that, I want to do something on my own. And there are a lot of things happening in that direction, but also at the same time, I am also trying to reach a place where in my headspace, I'm trying to reach a space where I want to do it mindfully, and I want I want to do those things in a very systematic manner and stuff like that. And the reason for coming back to this class for the second time was to get my roots more stronger in that sense. So maybe what basically I'm trying to get at here is after the explanation of what you just said, I think a class of karma yoga sounds more suitable for me at this moment than an Atmabodha class. Am I right to think of it this way?
I mean, I wouldn't say they're two mutually exclusive. You can still do work with these ideas. It's just that you will be doing the work in a slightly different way. So you're saying you're going to be starting a company and you have to put in a lot of energy. So like kind of what I said earlier, which is you rather do that rather than do this work, is your question?
Yeah.
So technically, nothing has to change from an external standpoint for this work to be successful, technically. But the problem is that most people have, or let's say not most people, every person is going to do what the strongest desire is, right? Like, so if you have the strongest desire to be successful at your company, that's the attention that you're going to be putting in, right? If you have a desire to wanting to do the company consciously, that's the work that you're going to be doing. So it's all about what your desire is. You just mentioned that you want to consciously do, start the company and consciously do the work. That's amazing. So that means that, this is in alignment. But you have to be very honest about what that desire is. If your desire is to go and have 100 partners and do that and engage in the sexual world, go for it. But be honest that that's what you want to do and do that. You know what I mean? So if your desire is I want to consciously be mindfully build my company and do all of that, that is, you're being very honest about it. So this work is going to help you. But you cannot do this work if you want to do 100 other things which are not conscious, right? If you're not trying to raise your consciousness, if that's not a desire you have, then this work is not going to be effective.
Sure. Makes sense. Thank you, Puneet.
For sure. Cool. So let's do one more verse because I think we need to do at least 4 in a class, or 4 or 5. Cool. Verse 2. Bodhonya sadhanebhyo hi sakshan mokshaika sadhanam pakasya vahnivad vina moksho na siddhyati. So just as the fire is the direct cause for cooking, knowledge is the direct means of liberation. Compared to all other forms of discipline, knowledge of the self is the only direct means of liberation. So here we are kind of given, this concept of cause and effect, right? If you want cooked food, if you want your rice to be cooked, you need to give heat, right? You need fire. So there is a direct cause for an effect. So if you want to be physically healthy, you need to do some physical exercise, right? If you want to be mentally healthy, you may want to do some mental exercise, right? There is always a cause and effect. This world is based on laws and intelligence. It's not random, right? There are certain energy that you put into something and the outcome results in the kind of energy that you put in. If you want to have a successful company, Shreyas, you have to put in the energy and then the company may be successful. So to get things done in the external world is much harder than getting things done in the internal world, right? If I want to be physically fit myself, it's much easier for me to go and do an exercise. If I want my partner to be physically fit, it's going to be very difficult for me to convince them to kind of be physically fit, right? It has to come from within. So similarly, if you're doing a project which involves many people, it's much more harder to, make it move in a specific direction because, there's so many minds and so many desires could be conflicting. So the good part is that, liberation is an individual experience and an individual process. So it's fully in my control, thankfully, right? Imagine if liberation was in 100 people's control. That would have been terrible. So the cause and effect is that I need to do something to get to liberation. So now the question is, what do I need to do? And then the question is, what is liberation and what is bondage? Because those are interesting questions, right? So liberation is essentially knowing who I am. And knowing who I am implies that there is some sort of knowledge that we are experiencing or we're gaining, or is being revealed, right? So like that's kind of like what knowledge means. And the consequence of that is like, or rather the precursor to knowledge is that there has to be some ignorance where I don't know something. And if I don't know something, only then can I know something, right? Like, so the first basis of not knowing something is, ignorance, which is I don't know something. And when an idea is given to you, then you know it. And then you can say, yes, I know. So like, if I ask you the question, what did I eat for dinner last night? You don't know because you're ignorant of that idea, of that knowledge. Now I can say, oh, I ate some Thai food last night. So like, okay, now you know. So like, there's always a cause and effect. And when it comes to liberation, like Arumal was saying earlier, I can do a bunch of austerities, right? Like I can go on a hike, I can do some exercises, I can do some asana, I can do breath work, I can do all of that. But that's going to not give me knowledge. It may do some things for sure. It may make my mind quieter. It may give me more energy. It can make me feel more alive, all of that. But my knowledge is still not very clear. I still may not know who I am. So the real way to know is to look, right? So in the case of like eating a mango as well, like I need to be fully paying attention to the experience of eating a mango to really know what a mango is. I need like my senses, like my attention should be on my my tongue and my mouth and the mango and the experience of it. So that's when I'm like, wow, this is what a mango is, right? Like if my attention is not there, I will not know. So there's this concept of like having to look at something fully with full attention. So the attention is very important in this work as well, where we are trying to build our ability to pay attention to something, because without attention, we cannot know anything. And all of the work that we do with the austerities brings us to this place where we can pay attention to something. And once we have this ability to pay attention, this work becomes very easy because it's direct. Because what it's saying is that, hey, pay attention to something that's always true, that's happening for you all the time. Just pay attention. And if we have the ability to like gather our mind's attention faculty and put it to some place, then this work becomes instantaneous because it's a direct means of liberation. And liberation happens instantaneously. It's not, you either know it or you don't know it, right? Like it's not like it's not like a progress bar, right? Like we're going like from 10 to 20 to 30, 40. It just happens directly. So this is why this is a direct means of liberation. And we will get into what the process is, but this is kind of giving us like a overview of that. Any thoughts about this? Okay, let's do one more. Avirodhitaya karma na vidya vinivartyayet vidya vidyam nihantyeva tejasti mira sanghavat. So action cannot destroy ignorance as it's not opposed to ignorance. Knowledge does verily destroy ignorance as light destroys deep darkness. Great. So this is kind of what we were, talking about earlier, which is, action, doing the, let's say breath work or like chanting and stuff cannot destroy ignorance. It can definitely give us certain things. It can give us energy. It can give us clarity, maybe. It can give us, better physical health. All of that it can give us, but it cannot destroy ignorance because ignorance is operating on a different level, a different dimension. It's in the dimension of the intellect, right? Like I have a doubt and, some information is given to me and then the doubt is removed. So like, I don't know what what you ate last night. And then you told me, now my doubt is gone. Right? Or I don't know what's behind the curtain. The curtain is revealed and now I know what's behind the curtain. So there's information leads to doubt being cleared. So action cannot. So like if there's something behind the curtain, no amount of action other than revealing, can really give a clear my doubt, right? Like doing push-ups or like doing pull-ups or going on a hike has no effect on what is behind the curtain or on my doubt about that. So all you can do is like open the curtain. And I'm like, all right, now I can see what's behind. So the idea is that, there's darkness, only shining light, which is my attention. So even if the curtain is open and if my attention is somewhere else, my doubt is not clear. So my attention is essentially the process of shining the light on something, and which is where, the analogy of light comes into play here, which is I can shine a light on a dark room and the room is revealed. But my attention needs to be on the room, right? If my attention is somewhere else, I will not know what's going on. So this work is focused on like the mind. So the problem is that the mind is ignorant. The mind is confused. The mind has doubt. And only the mind can be given knowledge and have its own direct experience for it to kind of open up, and the doubt and the ignorance gets destroyed. So, you may hear this a lot, which in the class, which is like, only the mind is ignorant. The self is ever free, which is there is something beyond the mind, which is always shining, always revealing our experience in this world. But the mind is the one that has the confusion, and it's the mind that's going to get liberated. The self is free all the time, which is why you will hear, if you read stuff on the internet or like books and stuff, you'll say, everyone's already self-realized. And that is true, because the sense of identity is if your identity is on the self, then you're already free. But if the identity is on the mind, if you think you are the mind, if you think you're the body, then that's where the confusion is, because that's the ignorance, where we think we are the mind and we think we are the body. And because we think we're the mind and the body, we feel limited and we feel bound and we feel trapped. But the moment our identity shifts to beyond the mind and the body, we are free, because then the body and the mind just becomes another experience in the self. And we're going to get more and more deep into these ideas. But I think we will only get to do 3 verses today. So maybe this is a good place to stop and take a couple of questions if anyone has any.
I have a question.
Sure,
so
Cameron.
To me, verse 2 and 3 seem to say that Advaita Vedanta is the only path to liberation. Like, is that true or not? Am I understanding that wrong?
Good question. So it is not the only path. So yeah, I guess I should have mentioned that in the intro. So Advaita Vedanta is a path. It's a valid means of knowledge, which means that, if you go down this path, if you do everything that it suggests, liberation is guaranteed. But it's not the only path. There are hundreds of paths. There's, I don't know if you want to go into specific paths, but there's like, there's hundreds of paths in Buddhism. There's hundreds of paths in like, yoga itself. So like I mentioned, karma yoga is a valid path. Raja yoga is a valid path. There's like Sufi traditions. There's mystic Christianity. There's like, mystic Judaism. There's all sorts of like paths. There's, but the problem is, you need to find somebody who knows what they're talking about and somebody who has traveled the path, because otherwise, you can get lost. You can get lost by doing your own self-study and like not really understanding it, because a lot of it has sort of cryptic meanings as well. And like, not, if you're just looking at it from an intellectual level, then it's not always going to work, because the mind can always produce all kinds of crazy ideas and make you feel confused. But to answer your question, no, this is not the only path. There's lots of other paths out there.
Thank you.
Puneet, can I make I guess more of a comment than a question?
Yeah.
And I'd like your perspective on this too. And it's almost, I have this, I'm kind of getting the feel, well, of late, I've been understanding that, like, for example, Ayurveda was a, medicine framework for that was created that worked in a certain point in time. And I guess what I'm getting at is that, all these different paths to liberation, to enlightenment, especially the traditional ones that have, been passed down like this one. I think many of them, that I'm kind of feeling that the challenge with traditional, or rather ancient methods of liberation worked really well in its time. And in this time, we're in a very unique point in time with, jobs and all these other economic forces that sort of are a big part of our lives. And so so I guess I'm wondering, well, it's a part of the comment, and partly like I'm wondering in terms of like where the role of Advaita Vedanta is, given that we're in this life, or even sort of how we think about, approaching this notion of liberation, right? Especially given the circumstances we're living in. And I wonder if this is sort of the marathon type of approach towards, hey, let's just chip away at this work, let's keep patient, and it will bear fruit, no doubt. And in that process, maybe you will sort of liberate your attachments to the economic world or something like that, right? But anyway, does that make sense?
Sure. So firstly, like, I don't think this thing says that you don't need to partake in the world. Like, I think that is maybe a misunderstanding based on like, what we usually hear about, like, you have to be a monk, or like, you have to kind of renounce the world. The renunciation aspect of it, we will sort of get into that a little bit more deeply as well, which is, renunciation is not about getting rid of the physical stuff that I'm interested in. It is a mental identification, which is renouncing the fruits of action, or you could say that, which is, I have a desire, I'm going to go through with the desire, but I don't care about the outcome. I'm renouncing the outcome, because that's where our sense of ego keeps building. So we can, engage in whatever we want. We can engage in starting a company. We can engage in like wanting to be a very famous writer. We can engage in like, wanting to like create, build a huge city, whatever it is. But the problem happens, and where we get entangled is with the sense of ego, right? Which is, it's my city, or it's my book, or it's my company, and I am not, living up to some expectation. Then that's the sense of ego. And if we can sort of apply certain tools where like that sense of ego is at a distance, then we are not going to get that identified with it. And to answer your question about the ancient versus modern, well, you'll be surprised that back then too, there was a lot of like economic activities. May not have been at such a large scale, but it was still there, and I can't, we obviously can't say like whether, what was it like to live in that time, and like, we can kind of like infer, but we will truly never know, right? What we do know is that at this time, these are the things that I need to do. These are the desires that I have, and we can only compare. I can only know my own desires and my own experience. I have absolutely no clue about anybody else, right? I'm only doing inference. And with this inference, we can get very confused about like, oh, this person may be self-realized or not. We have no clue, right? So we can only do our own work. And if you're at a place where, you have experienced the world a little bit, and you have seen the world for what it is, and you have a decent understanding that, yes, the world can definitely give me a certain amount of joy, but I know for a fact that it can never truly give me what I really am looking for. Then the journey of spirituality begins. Then it's not even so much about the Vedanta, right? There's this sense of seeking, where it's like I'm seeking something beyond just the material. If that's the seed that is the basis of starting this work. If that seed doesn't exist, then of course, like, this work is not going to be very productive. But if there is a seed of like seeking, which is like, I want to know, and then that's acknowledging that I don't know, right? Like wanting to know, there is a basis that, yes, I don't know. If that is there, then this work can be fruitful. And it doesn't have to be Advaita Vedanta. Any even a modern tradition or whatever, something that may be more modern may work. But the only difference between this and something else is that there is proof that this works, right? There are people who are alive today who have used this method and tools and have been liberated. Now, if somebody new comes along today and says, I have this new modern method and I'm going to teach it to you, I myself, personally, I'm going to be pretty skeptical because, you may have gotten realized, since you're, the person who's teaching it may have gotten realized, very good. But how do I know it's an effective teaching method? I don't. And that is very important because, it's not so, if we can get lost in somebody's personality and get wowed by that, and then we are going from one illusion to another illusion. We're not freeing ourselves. But with this, Advaita Vedanta, it doesn't have to be Advaita Vedanta. If there is historical evidence that yes, this person used this, got liberated, this person used this, got liberated, there are people right now using this, getting liberated, I'm yes, sign me up, because I am fairly, at least my mind or my intellect can say, yes, I trust this process. And I've met people who have been liberated. That's the joy. Then, then it becomes much more easier. So that's where how I would look at it, which is more about the effectiveness of it rather than the times and the the societal norms, they change from moment to moment, right? But I think that this tradition or this path or the Vedanta transcends that, because if you notice, the Vedanta doesn't talk about how to make this world a better place. It doesn't even touch that concept. It only talks about self-knowledge, because self-knowledge transcends society. It has nothing to do with the external. It's a fully inside job, which is why this work is a complete work. There's nothing you can add to it and there's nothing you can remove from it, because this is all about the self, and the self never changes. What can change is economic structures, societal structures, relationships, all of those things can change. But this is not working on any of those levels. This is working on the individual self level. And that's been constant, transcending society. And that's my view of it. That's how I would look at it. Does that make sense?
No, I think it's a very good point, and very sort of I think when you talked about the knowledge, the self transcends everything regardless of what is going on, I think that definitely resonates with me in terms of regardless of what time in age we are, and regardless of external stimuli, what's underlying does not change, and as long as you focus on that, the fruits would come.
Right. Yeah. And this is not the only tradition. So, if this is something that attracts you, then, then there has to be sort of a connection with something, right? Only when you're connected to something, when would you put in the energy. And it's good to go shopping in the beginning when you're trying to shop these different methods and traditions, and there will be something that will connect with you. And go there, put your entire attention there. Because you have to go where, like my teacher says, you have to go where you're fed. And if you're fed with chanting and stuff, go for it, because that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because in the end you're using this tool to get out, and then the tool, you can throw it into the garbage. In the end, you will read the last verse, which is the Advaita Vedanta is also illusion, which is it's just another idea. So, and it's as useless as anything else, but it's slightly more useful than just binge watching Netflix or something, right? So, but in the end, it's just an idea, and we will use this idea to gain something, and then toss this idea out, because it's we are done with it. I don't need it anymore. Cool. So we have about 8 minutes left. So I want to make sure we do a meditation. We may go slightly over because I want to do at least 10 minutes. Apologies if folks have to leave. Let's go ahead and leave as well. All right. So let me stop sharing my screen. Oops. All right. So everybody, they're going to do a quick meditation. And for this meditation, make sure you're sitting upright. So if you've been lying down or if you're standing, I would recommend sitting down. And just making sure your back and your neck and your head are aligned in a straight line. And if it's not, just noticing that it's not, and maybe shifting forward or backward to just feel that your head is resting gently on your shoulders. It's feeling comfortable. You're going to start by taking a few breaths, conscious breaths. Just noticing how that feels. The air going into your nose, into the lungs. The sensation of the chest expanding. Just do that a couple more times. Take like a deep, conscious breath. Just paying attention to the air and the lungs, the chest. Any sensations that you may be feeling with just the breathing. Maybe you can also scan your body gently from the top of your head to the bottom. Just notice any sensations. Maybe it's the sensations of the clothes on your body, sensations of the chair at the back of your body, or the floor that you're sitting on, or the cushion. You just want to notice. And what we have done by just noticing is that we have moved our attention and we're focusing it on certain aspects of our experience. So essentially, we've landed in this position of just being a witness. So we have this ability to pay attention to stuff that's going on. And we have this ability to move our attention to different parts. So we can move our attention from our nostrils to the back, move it from the back to our hands. And the reason we want to pay attention to the body is that the body is always in the now. And what I mean by that is that if you're lost in thinking, usually the thoughts are about things about which happened in the past, or desires that you want to do, which are usually in the future. But if you focus on any part of the body, we come back to what's happening now. So we want to get out of living in our thought world and recognize that we have this ability to move our attention. So we don't have to get involved in the thought world. We can notice thoughts are happening, maybe happening in the background, but we can pay attention to something else. The breath is good because it's happening continuously. Sensations are good. Anything that's happening continuously is good because you can always move to it. So if you notice that your mind is getting sucked into particular thoughts, recognize that that's happening and bring your attention back to the breath. You can imagine like you're sitting on the bank of a river, just watching the river flow. And this river contains the thoughts, maybe the breath as well. But what you don't want to do is jump into the river and engage with the thoughts and get lost in the story of the thoughts. You can recognize that you're having thoughts about maybe the food you want to eat after this. But that's the recognition aspect, like you're looking into a river. It's just flowing by. Thoughts are coming one after the other. But you want to sit on the bank, on the grass, lie down and just watch it. You are a conscious being that's aware, that's alive. And you're conscious of your body, your mind. You have this ability to focus on things. You have this ability to reveal things in your experience. And this is true all the time. You're aware all the time. Always aware. I'm always awareing, you could say. But I want to get very familiar with this place where I'm in this position of this witness. I want to get rooted here on this bank. My habitual tendency is to jump into the river, into the water. I want to try to reprogram that and get rooted on the bank. It's nice here. It's nice and sunny and dry. Always remember that you can focus your attention and bring it back. Even if you notice that you're in the river, you can always come out and step back. And slowly, when you're ready, you may open your eyes. So we're going to end this class with a chant. I'm going to share my screen again. And the way we do this is, you don't have to do this. So, it's, the tradition is that we end every class with a chant that reminds us about why we're doing this work. And this chant specifically is from another book that Adi Shankara wrote. And Adi Shankara was, a very staunch Advaitan, but he was also a bhakta, which is essentially was, a devotee of the mother. And he wrote a lot of hymns and beautiful poetry. And this is from this book called the Bhaja Govindam. This is verse 19. And the way we do this is that if you want to join me, you can feel free to sing it in the wherever you are, but please stay on mute so that we are not, singing over each other. So I would say we would sing each line twice. I would, obviously you don't know the tune, so I would say it and then you can repeat after me if you like, or you can just be silent. That's totally fine too. So let's begin. Yogarato va bhogarato va yogarato va bhogarato va sangarato va sangavihina sangarato va Sangavihina Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chitta Yasya Brahmani Ramate Chitta Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva Nandati Nandati Nandatyeva. So the translation for this is this. So let one revel in yoga, or let one revel in bhoga, which essentially means enjoying this world. Let one seek enjoyment in company or in solitude. She whose mind revels in the self, she enjoys indeed, only she enjoys. And this is essentially, the purpose of why we do the work, which is to really enjoy this world. Because this work, what it does is it doesn't really give us anything. All it does is it removes stuff, and it removes fear. And if fear is gone, we can enjoy everything in life. So I hope, realizing the self is a reality for all of us. And thank you all for participating in the first class. I'm happy to stick around for any questions. But this is the end of the first class.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Puneet.
Thank you, Victoria. Good seeing you.
Thank you, Puneet. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Puneet.
Thank you.
Puneet.